Hello, this is the lecture for Thursday, December 3rd, 2020, for European history. Yesterday, we talked about the meaning of the Middle Passage and the various things that we observed from the fictional, well, semi-fictional, semi-historical journey of Kunta Kinte as recorded in Roots, the miniseries, based on Roots, the book, based on the researches of Alex Haley into his own family's oral tradition, to the extent he could follow up with historical documents and evidence. And yesterday in class, I had a discussion with several people, and I asked you at home to weigh in with your emails, talking about if racism and slavery are in fact evil, and if they are also universal, slavery having existed in absolutely every pre-industrial agrarian society in one form or another, and racism being something programmed into our DNA, the tribalism that says, like people like you, distrust people unlike you. If those things are universal and horrible, why is it that the United States is particularly prone to profound and profligate guilt over both slavery, which ended in 1865, and racism, which was legally outlawed in 1964? And I asked you to write on these points. So now what I'm going to ask you to do, who are here, is weigh in with what you said online or with what you think right now. I'll start with volunteers, and failing that, I'll just pick people. Yes?
So I came up with a few points, one of which was America was founded on the belief of equality and equal opportunity.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. Yes.
Yes. So it seems to me, at least in my eyes, that slavery would be in every way contradictory to that clause. So it would make sense that we would be more offended by that and more hurt by that, because most people, the rest of the societies weren't, or at least most of the societies weren't literally contradicting the moral foundation that their country was founded on when they partook in slavery.
Indeed. By the way, feel free to shut the window and turn off the fan, or either or, whatever works for you. I don't want to chill you out if you're uncomfortable. You're right. Germany is a cultural region whose first history is mythical legends of Sigurd and Wotan and fighting the Romans at the Teutoburger Wall. It's not founded on liberal democratic ideas. The same is true for most of the old world. They are societies with traditions going back into deep antiquity, and they are defined by ethnic and racial and cultural and religious traditions. We break away from England and establish the longest running constitutional republic in the modern world. No constitution, other than arguably England's unwritten constitution, is older than ours as a still functioning primary source document for government, in other words, the basic law. And those basic laws are rooted in Enlightenment ideas of inalienable human rights. Slavery violates that. So we are, in fact, practicing the antithesis of what we say we are and what we say we believe. And if that doesn't produce a schizoid break or a schizophrenia, I don't know what will. And it does. When you study American history next year with Mr. Hall, you will learn the sort of games, the mind games that we played with ourselves to justify the constitutional republic and chattel slavery, including defining a slave as 3/5 of a human being, or 2/5 of a human. It's which is it? 2/5, 3/5? In what way? So yeah, there is that. Besides slavery violating our essential concept of ourselves, what else stands out as particularly American about this issue? American in terms of history, because you've said, an American in terms of guilt. We got three people left. Which of you will opine? Jackson?
Well, we got rid of slavery, and then after that, um, racism still occurred, and then we sort of fixed that. Well, most of it's gone, but then there's still parts of it lingering around, and um, well, when people get rid of slavery, it's kind of just gone, and there's racism still, but like it's not completely.
When we got rid of slavery after our bloodiest war, for the 5 to 10 years following, there was the period of Reconstruction. And in that time, the ideals of Union Republicans were brought to the South because federal troops were stationed in the South. And the South did not have much self government. But when self government, full self government, was restored to the former Confederacy and the troops were withdrawn, immediately we end up with a series of race based laws that we call Jim Crow. So are you suggesting that things were poisoned by that in a way that they wouldn't have been if after slavery was done there would have been no Jim Crow period?
Um, well, I think there still would have been a Jim Crow period, but maybe not as bad.
I'm sorry, I asked a bad question. Let me clarify. Did Jim Crow perpetuate racism beyond the period of slavery? Yes or no?
Yes.
And is the legacy of Jim Crow that we basically put off dealing with the problem of racism for almost a century? If you have other thoughts, go ahead and say them.
Um, hmm.
If you have other thoughts, go ahead and say them.
Um, I, I think hmm,
Fine, Jackson. You've said a few things. That's okay.
okay.
That's okay. If other things occur to you, go ahead. Miss, what do you
Um,
think?
so I was thinking about it, and the fact that we fought one of our bloodiest wars and put so much into stopping it, when we look back into history, it's like we put so much into this, and now it's just kind of like falling apart in small places, and there still is slavery, even if it's not as prevalent. Like we feel that guilt because we tried so hard to stop it, but it's still like happening.
When you say there is still slavery, are you referring to racism in our society, or are you referring to the sex slavery and the slavery in police states and that sort of thing?
Well, kind of like both at the same time.
Okay. How is racism and race in the United States like slavery today?
Well, I think it's just because we like, especially if you're white and you're like friends with a black person, you like if like I would feel the need to be extra careful and like treat them gently, but like like that kind of mindset is still in our heads that we have to treat them gently and like they
That's a
have to
problem.
treat us gently. Yeah.
By the way, having had friends of all colors, I can tell you nobody likes to be treated gently because
Yeah.
of their race. It's a block to intimacy and genuine friendship. It's also something that some of my black friends consistently make fun of. They'll like do things just to make their white friends uncomfortable who feel guilty about things. I have no race guilt, or I try my best not to. Here's why. The only blood relatives I had in the United States before 1902 were Vermont Congregationalists who were abolitionists who fought in the Civil War against slavery. Um, that's it. All of my other ancestors come from Ireland and from Cuba and from Puerto Rico during the 20th century, long after this. I have no blood tie to any racists. Even if I did, I didn't do it. Why the heck should I feel guilty? But a lot of people do. And a lot of people feel they have to go that extra mile to make sure that say, I'm not a racist, I'm not a racist, as if we need the reassurance that the people around us know that we're not racists. I will probably attach a comedy video about this very topic to the video lesson and show you a comedy video related to that very thing later in class after the lecture. Please remind me if you can. Um, when I was your age in Connecticut, when somebody wanted to assert their liberty or freedom, they would say these words, quote, "I'm free, white, and over 21," unquote. And that was very much in common usage in the early 1980s in Connecticut. Connecticut's a liberal state. Connecticut has some of the most progressive laws and has had for generations in the United States. And yet, Connecticutites were saying, "I'm free, white, and 21." What were they saying? It was casual. I don't believe that most of the people who said those words were racists in any real sense. But today they'd be damned as thought criminals for saying something like that. Ooh, you're revealing an internal racism. No, I'm saying something that I heard as a kid growing up. Thinking about it, it is a little racist. Yeah. But on the other hand, what is racism? Is racism slipping into old patterns, or is racism the belief that people are genuinely different because of their birth characteristics? I tend to think the latter. I have a higher standard for what qualifies as racism, or maybe it's too high. It's certainly not common today. It's not the popular idea today.
I see that quote more as like making fun of the societal problem of racism, saying it's like stepping back from it and saying, you know what, it's idiotic that my skin color and has any difference in whether I'm an adult person and have rights or not. It's idiotic that other people don't because of the same reason.
Mm. Humor is important. When you have a dying relative and everything is miserable, you need some humor. Mel Brooks made a career on making fun of the Holocaust. And Mel Brooks was Jewish, and he got a lot of people who had been victims of the Holocaust to work on his movies because he thought the worst thing that the Nazis could experience was being the butt of jokes. They hated being joked about. Robert Clary, a French Jew whose family was killed, all of them in the Holocaust. He was the only survivor of his extended family, appeared in the 1960s television show Hogan's Heroes, set in a German prison camp in World War II. A comedy about a Nazi prison camp. Why did he do that? Same reason. He thought that the worst thing for the Nazis would be to be the butt of jokes. So maybe it was that, or maybe it's just the times have changed. Do you have any other thoughts, sir?
Do you have anything specifically like you want me to?
I just look. Okay, I'm an alien from planet Zunok 5, and I walk down and I say, "What's this racism thing anyway? Why is it such a big deal?"
Well, like over the past couple of decades, I think America specifically has done a really good job at getting rid of any systemic racism or anything like that. But it's to the point where either political party tries to use race, has some sort of card to enforce their narrative. Like it's saying a certain political party supports Black Lives Matter. If you don't support that party, you don't support Black Lives. So they're using race that's not, which we have done a good job of getting rid of, has a card to like make people think it still exists, even when it may not.
So it's a way of manipulating people. But again, the root cause is why are they manipulable in this way? And for reasons that have to do with history and have to do with progress and politics and popular culture, it has become common to guilt trip people of a certain background and say that people of another background are inherently victims and therefore they need things equalized for them. When I got into college, I got into a very good college. probably a better college than I deserved. But I'm Puerto Rican. And at the time, affirmative action was there for Hispanics of my background. So I got into a college that probably I shouldn't have because of affirmative action. I ended up staying there at great cost because I wanted to fight and get my degree, and eventually I did. But if I was told, the only reason I got into this college is because of my skin color, that's not exactly a happy thing to hear, is it? No, I'd like to think I got in because of my work. I certainly stayed and got kicked out and got back in because of my work, both bad and good. I'd like to think that my life is the product of my own effort. When somebody says we'll make a special category for you with lower standards, what they're really saying is you can't hack it. And if you can't hack it, there's something wrong with you, which to me seems like another form of racism. President Barack Obama had been a legislator in Illinois' state legislature. He was invited to make the keynote speak at the Democratic National Convention in 2004. After that, he was nationally famous and he became the junior senator from Illinois. 2 years later, he was nominated by the Democrat Party to become their presidential candidate, and he won with a very strong mandate in 2008. The Nobel Committee gave him a Nobel Peace Prize before he took office. I'll say that again. The Nobel Committee gave Barack Obama a Nobel Peace Prize before he became the president. Why? Why him? The answer is, he was and is a charming man, an intelligent man, a thoughtful man, but his accomplishments did not warrant being nominated for the presidency of the United States without the fact that he was half Luo. I'm sorry, no. Yeah, Luo. That's his father's tribe. His father was Kenyan, an ambassador from the African nation of Kenya. His mother was white, American. And because he was of mixed race and identified as black, um, this is an opportunity to show that we're not a racist nation by electing the first black president. And the way people treat President Obama, compared to the way they treat any other president, President Trump, you'll see if Biden becomes president, how they treat him, how they treated Bush and Clinton. The way they treated President Obama was a little different, in part because of that race thing. Now, he was a two-term president, which means he may have gotten in because he was black, but he stayed in because enough Americans supported him to do that. Not trying to take away the fact that he was a successful president. By his lights, he certainly was. The point of this, and of bringing it up for you to talk about if you wanted to, and bringing it up again for those of you at home, is to think about this seriously. Because I'm telling you, as Americans in our society, the issue of race is one of the most divisive and important issues that exist. And I think there are people on goodwill on all sides of this issue. But I also think there are some people of bad will on many sides of this issue. Not just one. I'm not just saying my side is good, the other side is bad. I think that there are people who use race as a card to manipulate their own success. And to me, that's despicable. Yes.
Going back to Obama,
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of the reason why people treated him differently was because of the racism. Because there is still people, the KKK and racist people in the South, and a whole ton of other racial discrimination groups.
Yeah, well, there's also the Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan's group, who are black nationalists, who are very anti-white. They exist. There are people in the Black Lives Matter movement who are very anti-white. And not just anti-police, although when they march down a highway shouting, pigs in a blanket fry 'em like bacon, talking about killing police. But yeah, there are racist groups that still exist. Also, I will say this. Most people of goodwill wonder, am I racist? push comes to shove, am I somebody who has that prejudice? It's possible people your age don't wonder that. Most people my age do. People older than me do, certainly. They wonder if reflexively, behind their conscious mind, in their id, they are in fact racist. They would mind if their daughter married a man of different race, and all these other things. And I think what that has to do with is being scrupulous about your own values, investigating yourself to make sure that you try at least to live up to your own ideals, which isn't an easy thing to do because they're ideals, yeah.
I do find the racism against African Americans and other racial minorities more of a problem than racism for white people. Because obviously, I don't have my livelihood threatened on a daily basis. It's not as big of a deal for me. It might be because of where I live, and it might be because of other reasons, but there's most certainly a higher percentage of African American people who are affected on a daily basis and morally because of the racism than white people.
You're assuming that the racism of white people is the same as it was in the 1950s, I think. I don't think it is. I think if you were able to gaze into the souls of your fellow human beings, you would see among Americans of all colors a genuine desire to get past race. The problem is, logically, the only way I see of getting past race is to ignore it, to be colorblind, to basically view people based on the choices they make by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, to quote Martin Luther King. I don't think that most people want to be racist. And the problem is, the more we harp on race division, the farther away we are from being colorblind. The more you insist on looking at everything through the lens of race, the more difficult it becomes to say that race shouldn't affect my decisions. My words, my deeds will not affect my decisions. And to get to the point where when I meet Joe, I don't notice whether Joe is Asian or black or white or red or any of the colors of the rainbow. That I think is a goal, but I think it's very hard to do when people are constantly harping on the issue. Yeah, go ahead.
So would you agree that systemic racism is a problem and it does exist?
I do not. Absolutely do not. I do not believe that systemic racism exists. Absolutely not. I do believe that the Civil Rights Act for 56 years or 55 years, 56 years, has rooted out any kind of legal, bureaucratic, systemic racism in any of the systems that we have. What we have are choices that free people make that lead to different outcomes. In the military, one of the things that I've had veterans observe to me is that if you look at the composition of the elite special forces, most of them tend to be white. Not all, but most. You might say, is there a discrimination against black soldiers who want to be Army Rangers or Green Berets? Absolutely not. The Army aggressively has pursued affirmative action since the 1940s. What it is the choices that soldiers going in makes. It just so happens that most of the people who go into special forces and qualify for them happen to be white. Is that a racial discrepancy indicative of systemic racism, or is that a result of people freely choosing? That, I think, is an open question. The people who argue that there is systemic racism would say, yeah, any kind of discrepancy based on race is probably a result of systemic racism. I do not agree.
But would the
It's just my opinion, by the way.
yeah, I get that. But would the things that you described, the wanting for equality and striving for a better nation because of it, imply that there isn't equality at the moment for whatever reason, either culturally or systemically?
I think that whether or not there is or isn't inequality is a utopian question. I'm not trying to be offensive, I'm trying to be clear. There's always inequality. Equality is not a virtue that I particularly care about, unless it's equality under the law, equality of opportunity. That I care about. But equality of result can never happen. You're more ambitious than some other people your age. You're less ambitious than other people. You're more able than many people. You're less able than some, depending upon the area we're talking about. Your life will not end equally to the people around you. Your life will be a result of the choices and actions that you make. That, to me, is inherently unequal. It's unequal. I don't believe that assuming that a standard that causes everyone to have equality of result is in any way natural. And I would not say that the fact that we have a society that is unequal in fact isn't a result of racism, it's a result of choice. That's my opinion. Yours?
But would not the lack of the opportunity, the equal opportunity, and the legal opportunity, would not the racism and the things affect that? As you said, the colleges and job opportunities and stuff like that.
Well, right now and since the 1970s, they favored minority groups over white.
So you would agree that there would be like inequality there?
No,
Legal.
I believe that the inequality is because of the affirmative action programs. I believe that affirmative action programs that employ racial quotas in order to correct past racial inequality is inherently racist. So yes, in that sense, there is inequality that should be changed by the abolition of affirmative action programs. That's my belief. But it's not necessarily right, nor is it popular. But are you arguing, therefore, that since there is affirmative action, and therefore that is unequal, that we are a society plagued by inequality?
Well, that and also that um, again, my opinion.
Sure.
I do believe that racism is not a thing of the past, and that systemic racism and stuff does still affect people today,
Okay.
as you see in at least if you don't mind me talking about it in black neighborhoods and black schools and stuff.
Why would I mind? Go ahead.
Okay. A lot of times, at least how I see it, from my point of view, the kids who are of a different skin color than I am, in many cases, are economically at a disadvantage for job opportunities and a lot of the neighborhoods that they live in and a lot of the places that they put in. So in a lot of cases, those kids aren't as apt to learn and aren't as apt to learn because they're more worried about if there's going to be food on the table, less about the geography of Africa.
Is that any different from poor white trash, as they're called? In other words, poor whites who live in ghettos in cities or in the countryside. Is there an inherent difference?
Yes, because of the ancestral disadvantage that those.
But those ancestral disadvantages go for white people too. They go for some Asians. They go for people of all types, for Native Americans. Being poor is also a universal thing. And if you come from a family that is poor and uneducated, you're not necessarily going to walk into the school with the skills necessary to succeed there. And you're not going to have your desire to be a success in school reinforced at home. That is not purely a racial thing.
But why are the majority of poor people and people who are economically disadvantaged in this country minorities?
They're not. If you look at the numbers, the African American community is between 10 and 20% of the population. They are not the majority of poor people.
No, but
What there is statistically is a higher proportion.
that's what I was.
Okay, fair enough. And the answer is it takes some generations to build your way out of poverty.
Precisely, which is what the affirmative action, in my eyes, is trying to accomplish.
That's exactly right.
Is to speed that up.
Yep. The question is, can you give salvation to a person? Or must each of us earn it? And by salvation, in this case, I mean economic success and joining the middle class. Can you be middle class without having middle class values? Without really being willing to take personal responsibility, work hard, and earn your keep? Those virtues are universal. And if you apply them, you will have some success in life. If you have a society that does not have legal racism or legal restrictions in other ways based on your birth. Those legal restrictions have been gone for a very long time, and yet the inequalities still exist. Why? Because it takes time to build out of poverty. Why? Because the culture of the ghetto rips down people who try to succeed. That is something that people do to themselves. I don't, when I say it rips down, I mean, let's say you work hard and you all don't, and you're all the same type of person. Um, he's trying to get above you. He's trying to get above himself. He's a class traitor. He's looking down on you. He thinks that he doesn't stink. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The viciousness of that kind of mockery is something I've personally seen as a student and as a teacher. And it's really intense in certain communities, including certain black neighborhoods and ghettos. But it's also something I've seen in the countryside, among hillbilly kids, among the kids of people who work in the woods. In any event, you get last word because you should. You've made an eloquent argument on your side. Would you like to conclude that argument? Because we do need to move on.
Yes. I do believe that in many cases the economic place of America makes it so that a lot of the uh, class moving up in class, is not necessarily an illusion, but more possible than I think a lot of people think it is. It is to some extent luck, and I don't think that's how it should be. However, that's obviously my personal opinion.
Of course it is.
And so I feel like because of one, like the economic, there's a word for that.
Socioeconomic status, socioeconomic background,
like status, but like
conditions.
static, like the inability.
Okay,
to move
inertia.
Up and down.
You're talking about social inertia.
Yes, the inability to move up and down keeps a lot of the poor people down, and makes it so that
Poverty is depressing.
yes,
Really, and I have gone without meals. My family did receive assistance at one time. Poverty is depressing. That means I'm not trying to take away your last word. I'm trying to agree with part of your point. If you are poor, and if everything around you indicates that it's hopeless for you to even try to better your condition, the degree of depression that you have to fight your way through tends to be intense. Whether somebody who's from a middle class background who has examples of success all around them, or an upper class background who benefits from the success of their ancestors, has the same thing to fight through, I agree, they probably don't. So in that sense, poverty is something that holds you down, like being sucked down in quicksand. Thank you. Thank you for the conversation, and thank you for listening and at home. It's worthwhile. At least, I hope so. So, we have talked about Thomas Hobbes and his Leviathan, how we are cells in the body politic, the giant amoebic creature that is England or France, Spain or Portugal, Italy or Germany, Poland or Russia, Sweden or Finland, or Turkey. The willingness of a person to subsume themselves into the Leviathan is important in preventing their life, to the extent possible, from being short, mean, and brutal. Now we come to John Locke. And Locke is probably the most important person before the American Revolution to the American Revolution. John Locke's ideas were chiefly responsible for Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence and others. Rousseau is almost as important, but Locke, I think, even more so. I am a Lockean liberal, though in modern times I would be called a conservative. The terms that Europeans and political scientists use, people seem to be confused about where we are in the notes. We are after the documents, after France compared with England, item E2, John Locke. So we're right below France compared to England. I am a Lockean liberal. Conservatives in European and political science terms are papists and monarchists. I am not a person who wants the Pope to dominate government, certainly not this Pope, and I am not somebody who is a believer in monarchy, in absolute monarchy. So I am not a conservative by those terms, only by modern American terms. What I am is a Lockean liberal, or a classical liberal. The word liberal means liberty oriented, oriented towards freedom of choice to the maximal degree for each and every individual. Lockean liberal is the term. Now, in America, Lockean liberals were basically what today would be conservatives, and progressives would be what today are liberals. What happened? Well, the progressive movement played itself out in the 1910s, in the 1900s and 1910s under Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. And it culminates in, among other things, the amendment to the Constitution that brings prohibition. No booze, no alcohol. Prohibition was never popular among the broad spectrum of Americans. And Americans, when faced with an unreasonable law, don't obey it. Prohibition gave us the mafia. It gave us organized crime. Before Prohibition, the mafia was one of many ghetto gangs that preyed upon their own immigrant populations. But since everyday Americans in vast numbers wanted to have booze and they couldn't buy it legally, they made connections, kind of like people buying marijuana. And they made sure that they had their booze. And this enriched organized crime and created the modern organized crime networks that we've been plagued by for the last 90, 100 years. Prohibition ultimately was ripped down by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt about a dozen years after it was established. Prohibition, along with many of the other progressive policies of the 1900s and teens, by that point was so unpopular that Democrats wondered how they could get elected and still pursue the ideology that they have. And somebody in Roosevelt's circle, when he was running for president, said, "Why don't we call ourselves liberals?" And the press went along with it. And so suddenly progressives became liberals. People like me were no longer going to be called liberals because that would confuse people. So they were called conservatives. And that's where we get modern American political nomenclature. It's a little different than classical. Locke is the father of classical liberalism. And what he talks about, among other things, is that natural law, if you look at human beings in the state of nature and human beings in the state of historical existence, are born, made by their creator, with certain inalienable rights. Now, inalienable rights, the word alien means separate, separation. So, inseparable rights. These are rights that you are born with that cannot be taken away righteously by anyone except through due process of law. What is one of these self-evidentiary rights? Life. We have a right to life. We are born, we live, we die. You, as an individual, do not have the right to take another person's life. We have a right to life. Now, as with the Ten Commandment prohibition against killing, the government can override that. If there's a state of war, you can kill the enemy. You can be killed by them. And if a person commits a capital crime, they can be executed after due process of law. But that is through the due process of law. It is not as a result of a private choice. We have a right to life. The second right is liberty. We are not born as ants in a hill, as drones in a hive. Unless we are born injured or broken, we are born with the ability to reason. And as we have the ability to reason, we have the ability to judge, to discern, to think, to make decisions on our own. Therefore, we should be free to make important choices. What I'm going to do is write out a variant of the American dream. And that's what most people think the American dream are. They'll say, I want my kids to do a little better than I did. Well, that's part of it. But it's an if-then statement. If, then. So what's the first if? If all men, by that I mean human beings, have, write this down, priceless value. If all men have priceless value, as Judeo-Christian values say, we are made in God's image. You cannot put a price on a creature that can think that is made in God's image. That's the first if. If we all have priceless value. Now the second if all men, human beings, can learn reason. If all men can learn reason. Reason is the ability to logically calculate and judge, to assess choices and their consequences, to use dispassionate, objective thinking to make and guide your choices in life. Not reacting emotionally, not reacting predictably, not reacting like, hammering somebody's knee and seeing what their reflexes are, but being an independent judgment maker. If all men can learn reason. So if all men have priceless value, and if all men can learn reason, then all men should be free. Now, free does not mean anarchy. Free does not mean with maximum licentiousness. What free means is to have the maximum personal choice feasible in your life as an individual that is consistent with a free society. So your freedom does not include the freedom to kill another. That's stealing their life. Nor does it include something else. The second thing, the state of freedom should be maximally applied as reasonably as possible because people can be trusted to make the right choice. That's the thing about freedom. So many people talk about freedom, but they don't trust people with freedom. How many times have I heard, well, you can't trust people to do the right thing? Then you don't believe in freedom. You believe in something else. You believe in your paternalism. You believe in nudging, guiding, and manipulating people, in ruling over them because you somehow know better than they do. Freedom, a belief in it, means trusting that people, sooner or later, will do the right thing. Not that they'll do what you think they should. You are a person. So am I. You do not have a window into God's true will. You do not know what is good and evil, right and wrong beyond a point. Therefore, when people do things that you don't understand, you can either assume they're stupid and evil, or you can trust that with their freedom, they have come to different conclusions than you have. And it takes a certain degree of humility to assume that people have come to different conclusions that you have. I have not yet given up on the election being called on the count of voter fraud, but that's something that may or may not happen. Frankly, I would hate to think there's that much voter fraud, but there could be. However, if, as is entirely possible, it turns out that for reasons I can't fathom, a majority of the American people and the American states chose Joe Biden to be president, you know what? They're free to do so. I'll have to deal with it. I won't like it. I will continue politically to be an active citizen and support those things I can support and oppose those things I oppose. I will wish Biden the best of success in being a good steward to this country, just as I wished Obama, even though I didn't like him at all either. And I will support whatever president is there if they support what I think is good. And I will oppose because, you know why? Freedom. I don't assume that people who think differently than me are dumb or wrong. I assume that they have come to different conclusions. I have my thoughts on why, but I know this, and I recommend this to you for your consideration. If you fall into the trap of assuming that anyone who disagrees with you about something that you really believe about and really care about is stupid or evil, you have taken the first step towards becoming a fanatic, a person who doesn't really think anymore, a person who is programmed by something. Good people think differently than us, than you, than I, than you and I. Good people can come to the opposite conclusions of us. Smart people can think differently than us too. If you believe in freedom, if you believe in liberty, you have to give people the scope to make decisions even if you think they're unwise. That's hard, especially if you care. That is liberty. The third is property. John Locke says property is the third inalienable right. Jefferson fudges it. Why? Because Jefferson, a Virginia slave owner, wants to abolish slavery with the Revolution in 1776. These people who rip down statues of our founding fathers drive me nuts because they are largely ignorant of the truth, or many of the truths of the history. Jefferson wanted to include life, liberty, property, and be faithful to John Locke. But what he was afraid of was that Southern slave owners would use his words to justify their ownership of other human beings. So Jefferson changed property to the pursuit of happiness. Now, why did John Locke assert property? You who have been steeped in some variant of Marxism might wonder that specifically because Marxism says property is theft. I work hard. You work hard. Should we receive the bounty of our efforts? Locke says yes, for a couple of reasons. First of all, an independently supporting person is not liable to be pressured by others to go against their conscience. If I earn my keep, I get to say what I believe, come what may. I am not going to be silenced or muzzled because I am afraid of losing my job. Independent people need independent means. Otherwise, the powerful people who take care of them will control them. That's the first reason. The second reason is that a society that recognizes your property rights recognizes you as somebody who is capable of amassing and controlling your own legitimate resources. They are yours to do with as you will. That's an aspect of freedom, where you spend your money, how you spend your money. Do you have charity that you give? Do you buy this or that kind of house? Whose store do you go to? Who do you patronize? All of these things are your choice. Do you contribute to politicians, to political campaigns? If so, how much? That's your choice. A society that does not grant you the right to earn your keep, a society that denies you the righteous fruits of your labor, is a society that treats you like a subject, not like a citizen. Human beings have the capacity to earn a living, and they should have the right to reap the rewards of that effort and of that labor. And a government that violates those rights is a government that owns you. Jefferson once said in imitation of Locke that a government powerful enough to give you everything that you want or need is a government powerful enough to take away everything you have. If you are dependent upon the state controls you, owns you. And that's a problem in a free society. So Locke says life, liberty, and property, and Jefferson paraphrases that. Now we go to, and Locke wrote the English Constitution of 1689. 1688, this glorious revolution, William and Mary, the restoration of a Protestant monarchy, the abolition of the Stuarts. And in 1689, John Locke is given the awesome and glorious responsibility of writing the English Bill of Rights, and he does so. So he is the man that the founders most admire. But then there's Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And what Rousseau says is that if we want to benefit from our shared society, we owe that society loyalty and limitation. It's sort of a positivist approach to Leviathan. What Rousseau says is that there is a social contract, that when man establishes governments, those governments are there to help us work together for our common good. If we want to be farmers, we have to build irrigation systems. Individuals can't do that. You need the coordinated effort of the community to really build large-scale irrigation and develop large-scale agriculture. You need to also have people who can function collectively. In order to benefit from the good that society gives each of us, law and order, peace and prosperity, an opportunity to live your life, you must give up certain freedoms. That's the social contract. So I give up the freedom to kill anyone that irritates me. I give up the freedom to take what I'm strong enough to take from someone else. I give up the freedom to be lawless. I must accept that I am under law and that my actions can and will affect others. That is the price I pay for being a member of society. Rousseau is the second most influential Enlightenment philosopher to our founding fathers. And he is more of an influence on the people who established the French Revolution. Do you understand the inalienable rights of John Locke and the social contract of Rousseau? These are fundamental ideas, and because of our discussion on race, I've had to give them quickly. If you don't understand, you'd better ask. Inalienable rights cannot be separated righteously from a person without due process of law. Social contract, give up freedom to benefit from society. We'll continue from there tomorrow. Have a good weekend. Thank you for your involvement, and Mr. Heaton especially, thank you for your conversation. No joke. It makes things better. And thank you, those of you at home. Bye.